Everybody, Doug Pfeifer from the Resilient Purpose podcast. Today, we are talking with Seth Munsey, who is a strength and conditioning coach for the Professional Disc Golf Association. But actually today, we're actually going to be talking about first responder wellness because he is a veteran with the Coast Guard and also has been an EMT for a number of years. And he is an advocate for mental health and making sure that first responders take care of their mental wellness. And we have a great conversation. Number one, about traumas on the job and how his traumas tended to reappear later in life beyond his career as a first responder. And so we really talk about the importance of taking care of our mental health as much as we try to take care of other parts of our life. And so that we can build resilience and live the life that we truly want to live while doing the job that we love as first responders. So I hope you will enjoy. He comes to us with such passion for the profession and the work that first responders do, but also talking about the importance of taking care of our mental health. So enjoy. Thank you for joining me. I'm really excited to kind of talk about this because this topic of just mental health and wellness related to first responders. So Seth, before we kind of get into the weeds of that, can you just tell everybody your history as a first responder? I'm sure you'll probably do a better job than I would have kind of talking about your experience in the first responder world. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So right after I turned 18, I graduated 18 after high school. I was one of those 17 all the way through graduation kids.
Yeah.
Turned 18 in September, and I left for boot camp for the Coast Guard in Cape May, New Jersey. I left, I think, 2 weeks after I turned 18. I was on my way to boot camp. Did 8 weeks in boot camp in, again, Cape May, New Jersey. And then I got stationed at Station San Francisco, which was a dream station, 35-man station when I was there, person station when I was there. And it really was, it was a dream to be there. I know I had friends in boot camp that got stationed on, bigger ships where they were, just part of a small crew, part of a large crew where we were the primary search and rescue and law enforcement unit for the San Francisco Bay. So very, very busy. I was there from 99 to 03. And after 9/11, we grew a little bit to about a 65 person station, so that we could handle everything that we needed to, the responsibilities, the increased responsibilities. And
so you had to do a lot more security. Is that kind of what happened at?
Yeah, absolutely. So after 9/11, I still remember waking up. It was my day off, and got a call from my girlfriend now, girlfriend at the time, said, "Hey, something happened. Something's going on." I woke up, went up and saw her, drove an hour to see her just to get a phone call from my boss saying, everyone's got to be back to the station here in the next hour or two. Turned around, got right back down there, and then we started doing 12-hour shifts where it was 12 hours out on the boat, 12 hours back sleeping, then back 12 hours. So we had our boats out the whole time, because we didn't know the next threat was going to be, right? And so we were, around the San Francisco, the Oakland Bay Bridge, around the airports, the estuaries, all that, all the big sites, stopping every boat we could see. And so that's where we grew too, because security changed. We were spending most every day out there on the water, having a presence at all those different locations, that could have been potential targets. So I spent 4 years there, again, search and rescue, a lot of, and I'll get into this, I'm sure, later in the podcast, a lot of bridge jumpers, a lot of working, Lacey Peterson. I don't know if people remember that,
Oh yeah.
We spent a long time looking for her, spent a lot of time working, drug enforcement and lots of different activities there. After I got out of the Coast Guard in 03, I signed up for the Santa Rosa Junior Fire College Fire Department Academy, Fire Training Academy, spent some time there. And then I got moved down to Southern California, where I'm originally from, and got hired on an ambulance doing primarily 911 in Southern California in Orange County. And I also worked for Orange County Fire as a reserve firefighter for them. And I did that for, I think, about 5 years. So almost a decade of experience working in emergency first response. Um, and then, just even though I moved on to a new career path in 2007, I've never really left the that field, in the sense of, I can't not stop at an incident when I see it on the road, or, and I've been involved in many different situations where I've been on scene to help in any way that I can, since then.
It's in
Both
your
outside of
blood.
yeah, it's in my blood. It's crazy, that it's still something I'm drawn to, even though I've been out of it for a while. But it still impacts me, and I know, as we'll get into this podcast, of many of the ways it's
Yeah.
still connected to me. It's still part of who I am.
Did when 9/11 hit and kind of everything seemed to kind of intensify, did that change things in terms of the job and in terms of how you were experiencing the job? Sounded like that there was some unpredictability, like you're not really sure what's going to happen, or just always kind of being under this, is this threat going to turn into something, like what's going on, and what that was like for you guys?
Yeah, absolutely. Like it did, because we were in a high target area. Like San
Yeah.
Francisco is a high target area. So, high value targets, like, we got the bridges, we got the airports, we got lots of different monuments. I mean, you could attack from land, air, or sea, and so we were always out there. And we were getting, at that time, we didn't know what was a credible threat or not. So we were getting threat, notifications of, it's like, reports of, hey, something could be happening here or there. And we didn't take that lightly. Like, we went out there thinking this could
Be it.
happen, like this could be it. And so you were always under stress when you were going out on the water, for patrol. And we responded to a lot of things. A lot of people would call in and say, hey, I saw something on a bridge. Hey, I saw, someone out on a boat near the airport, acting strange. And so we had to show up as if anything was going to be, like it could be the time, to take action.
So you guys kind of, the thing that's standing out to me is that you guys, those calls are like, had a different flavor to it. It seems
Yeah.
like you're ready for the worst possible scenario on just about every call. And then you can go, and then you probably have a lot of calls that really weren't anything,
Oh
but
yeah.
you're jacked up for it as if it's going to be something. And then it's kind of like, so you're getting like revving the car to 8,000 RPMs and then quickly having to kind of like come back down. And that's really kind of working your mind and body pretty heavily.
Absolutely. It's, I guess I've never really thought about it this way until like right now. So putting into words may be a little jumbled, but it's like that, like an animal that, like, you have to be ready to jump at any point, but you also have to be very relaxed and doing what you're, in the moment. And what you have to be calm. You have to enter a situation like, I could leave my cave right now. I could leave my home and go eat, or I could be eaten. And I have to be prepared for both situations to happen in a moment. Like, in a moment.
You can't relax in a sense, but you have to be sharp, right? You have to always perform at your best. And there's an expectation for first responders in general, but I'm sure definitely at that time, I mean, it probably intensified that we have to be on at all times and ready to, even when you're off, you have to you're probably thinking, I'm going to get called in. There's always that chance. And it's hard for you to settle and be regulated in those throughout your shift and throughout the day. And that gets pretty overwhelming.
The highs and lows of your system, what's being put on your system, is just incredible. And the thing is, in the moment, when you're going through it, you don't really think about it that much. Like, you're numb to it. And that's what makes you good at your job. It makes you good at your job, that you can be ready to go at any moment, but also be in a position where you can stay relaxed. And it doesn't feel like that's very stressful until years later, you analyze and go, wow, that's a lot. Like, to show up at your job, to have a job where you show up where it's like, I could walk onto this boat, I could step over onto this boat just to be checking for life jackets, or I could be fighting for my life 10 seconds later because they have, a reason to fight me. And I can't just run around the corner. Like, I'm out on a boat, in the middle of the San Francisco Bay. And we had incidents where it's like, you show up and you just step over. It's like, hey, how's it going? And next thing you know, all the training that you've ever done on trying to make sure that a boat doesn't sink has to come into play right there. And and all you did was you were expecting to just walk out, just come up next to the boat and just talk to them. Hey, someone called for help. And next thing you know, it's like, bam, I'm trying to keep a boat from sinking and get people off the boat and save lives and all that. And then an hour later, be back at the station, having a sandwich. Like,
right. It's just go back to normal. All right.
Right.
One of the things that we talk about, especially with our stress response related to like with what makes it traumatic, is a lot of times we're experiencing a stress response that stays on for prolonged periods of time. And you're like, the typical stressors you have that most people have in the day, they get stressed because they're hungry, or they get stressed because, but they can come back down to balance. They can take care of what they need to, and then they're good. Whereas with what makes things traumatic is you're staying in this stress state for long periods of time, and you're never really coming back to a state of calm and regulation. And when you were talking about it, it made me think about the mental health field and the work that we do. Is a big issue that we have a hard time not taking home all the stuff that we deal with throughout the day. So even though we might be off at work at 5 o'clock or 7, we're really don't stop thinking about it until the next day. And then we have to start back over again because we're dreaming about it. We're thinking about it while we're trying to have a conversation with our significant other. Like, our mind is, we really struggle to check out. I'm wondering if that is something that is similar in your field, where even though you're off shift, you still bring that stuff home with you, and it's kind of always on, or it's frequently on your mind for a good portion of your time.
Absolutely. I mean, it's on your mind it's on your mind all the time. Because, when you get home and you're with your family, your friends, it's not uncommon to hear other first responders, police, fire, EMS, like, talk about it. It's like, you go out to eat and you're still thinking, if something could happen right now, I'm going to be the one that jumps in there, and, or, hey, I had a day yesterday that had this and this and this happen. And it's hard to just shut it off. You're playing with your kids and you're like, I ran on a call with a child yesterday, and now I'm rolling on the ground with my kids. And I didn't just see the child, I saw the parents screaming in agony and horror and terror over it. Right. And now I'm on the ground with my kid rolling around, so you can't, there's never like a downtime, even though it feels like it. It feels like it. You use strategies that you're not really trained to use, and not even that they're good strategies. It's just you do whatever you can in the moment. You're like, I'm going to preoccupy myself with other things. I'm going to, you don't have a therapist to talk you through it.
Is the main strategy for most, I mean, that you see where it's kind of what you mentioned in the beginning, which is to compartmentalize, to avoid, to kind of try to stuff it away where I don't have to try, like, you're doing your best to try to keep it from getting you, but I would imagine, because much of like what we deal with in our field is it comes back stronger. Like, the more you try to like push it down, it's kind of like, I'm not okay with that. I'm going to come back and, I want to make sure that that, hey, you have to deal with this.
Yeah. You push it down, even though we don't know how to push it down. It just happens. It's just something that you just do because it's a survival mechanism of like, hey, if I let this affect me, I'm probably not going to be able to do my job. Maybe I lose my job. Maybe I, go, places that I don't want to go in my head.
Yeah.
And, I was talking to my therapist yesterday about this. Something that's really came to my mind recently was like, you know, I led, and I still do in many ways. I'm breaking free from that. But I led, and probably even you and people in your profession have, as well, in many ways, I led a secret life. I led a secret life. I led a double life. And it's crazy to think about that, because I had a profession where everything that happened to me in my profession, I couldn't tell anyone about, right? I didn't want to go home and tell my wife or my children, or call my mom up and tell her about the horrors that I was seeing, and that's not every call is a horror, but that doesn't matter. Like,
Right.
maybe I would tell my wife about the funny story about someone who, the elderly lady who fell and used the thing and, pushed the button. We got there. She was so happy to see us, and everything worked out just fine. Right. Maybe I'll say that, but I led a secret life where I didn't talk to anybody about it. And I didn't talk to my coworkers about it. Like, we don't just sit there and talk about, the calls that we
How we're
go
affected
on.
by it or the experience of it. Yeah.
Exactly. And, for many people, like, many people lead lives where maybe they don't talk about what they do at work because they find it boring, or they just don't want to talk about work. Not because they're like, I don't want to trigger anyone with what
Right.
I do, and I don't want to trigger myself. But then, they'll do parades where we're waving at people and this, that. And people are like, oh, you guys are heroes. You're doing this. I can't imagine. But everything we do at work, almost everything we do at work, has to stay inside of us. And one of my favorite quotes, but from Joseph well, no, this isn't from Joseph Campbell. Another quote I left from him, but many from him. But a quote that I heard years ago was, "They tried to bury us; they didn't know we were seeds," and that really stuck with me.
Yeah.
Is I buried all that stuff, and I was good at burying it. I was good at my job, and I didn't know they were seeds. I didn't know that they were going to sprout into PTSD many years later. I didn't know that
Yeah.
they were going to affect me in the way that they did.
So when you said that you had a couple of questions around your point of that, I can't bring it home and talk to my family about it. I don't talk to my coworkers about it. Is that something that's unwritten, or was that explicitly kind of encouraged to not communicate about it? Like, is that something that
Yeah.
it just kind of, how did you know not to talk about it and be told, or like, is that something that was explicitly told? Like, hey, we don't talk about that stuff. Like, we don't talk about Bruno. Like, we
Yeah.
have
Yeah. Yeah.
to, is that something that happens, or is it a different way?
No, it's unwritten. When you're EMS, when you're a first responder, I mean, you're a protector. And you try to help people, and you try to protect people from what goes on in this world, the best you can.
Mhm.
And that includes your family. And one part of it is you want to have a space that isn't chaotic and isn't stressful.
Mhm.
And so to bring that into now your home, you're like, I had just spent a whole 24-hour, 40 or 72 hour, 48 or 72-hour shift dealing with stuff, and now I don't want to go home and have to relive it. But also, it's like, I don't want my significant other to have those pains, have those horrors. I still remember one time I did say something of like, I was at the Coast Guard station, and we were doing a patrol. It was like a 12-hour patrol. And it was overnight. It was throughout the night. It was from like 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. or something. I was out on the boat, and we got a call for a person in the water, and they had like fallen off like a crew, like one of those, like a boat, like they were drunk or something. They fell off a boat,
Yeah.
a party boat, and they like when we got there, they had drowned.
Yeah.
And so we pulled this person out of the water. And the officer in charge, or I can't remember who in command said it, but it was like, hey, you guys go ahead and just like, take the rest of the night, go home. We got another crew ready. They're just going to go out and finish it. And so I got home at like 2 a.m. or something. I still remember. And the wife is like, what are you doing home? And I was like, Lady fell off a party boat and drowned. We just pulled her body out of the water. And so they just said, hey, just go home. I don't think it was doing for mental health reasons at that time. It was just like, oh, we'll get another crew out there. You guys finish up. And my wife still remembers that to this day. This was probably like 2002 or something. And she still remembers that. She's referenced that. She's like, I still remember waking up to you walking in the room and saying that. And then it was hard for her to sleep the rest of the night. And I fell asleep like a baby. And, at that point, the sleep problems didn't happen till way later. Sure. But to her, she's like, so it's unwritten where you just want to protect others from those horrors that you see. And like I said, it's not 24 hours of horrors. There's a lot of camaraderie. There's a lot of, family, feeling in EMS, when you're as a first responder with others. So there's really good times as well. I don't want to portray it as you just, 24 hours of hell, but there's a lot that you see that the normal person just doesn't ever get exposed to that affects you.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's also, I'm curious as if things change for you over time. So like the accumulation of experiences, these really difficult calls over time, that you're, almost like, athletes wear and tear on the body, you start to break down over time. Does that happen over time, especially if you're not doing a lot of preventative work for your mental health and that type of thing to kind of keep your mental health strong in those moments? Like, did you notice that, in the first few years of my career, it wasn't as difficult, but man, I started noticing things over time, 5, 6, 7 years into it,
Yeah, absolutely, Doug. Like, so I still clearly remember the first time I realized how messed up I was mentally from all this. And it was while I was still on the ambulance. And I remember, I'm going to describe a little bit of a scene here. But I remember we got a call for a vehicle accident out on this canyon road. It was a very busy canyon road at like 6 or 7 in the morning. And we got on scene, and there was a car that was driving down the road one way, lost control. They estimated like 65 miles an hour, went sideways. Passenger side went right into the front end of a box truck that was driving about the same speed the other way. So this car was like probably 2 feet wide. Like it had been accordioned up. It was smushed completely, right? And all there was an arm and a little bit of long blonde hair hanging out of the window, like it was squished. You couldn't see anything else in there. And turned out it was like a 16-year-old girl, and she was trying to get home to be with her family. And so we heard some stuff, and there was nothing we could do for her. Jaws of life, nothing was going to help her at that moment. And so we're all just standing around. I think we're like having a cup of coffee, or just standing around talking about what we were going to do that day. And I'm like 2 feet away from this young girl who just perished. And it sounds morbid, but in the moment, it's like, it's weird. It's like you get to that point where it's like you try to you put up such a shield that you get so good at not letting those things affect you that I think like the average person might hear that and be like, Seth, you're a monster. Like, why would you not be like horrified? And
how could you not be affected by that?
Like, how could you not be? But it's weird. It's like you get to that point where I was like, and I still remember standing there, like just hanging out, like talking to the other crews, just like, oh yeah, as soon as I get off work, I'm gonna go do this. And I thought to myself, like, I'm messed up right now.
Yeah.
I'm messed up that I can be standing here talking about this. There's something going on in my head that is not allowing me to be able to process things that I should be processing normally.
Well, that's what a lot of people don't understand about our brain, is that there are these unconscious processes, these lower brain processes that take over to protect us. And so we end up doing things that we later, when we reflect on it, maybe are upset about, like, oh, I can't believe I did that. What an awful person I am. Or I can't believe I did. Like a lot of times when we work with people from trauma, it's like, I didn't fight back. I just froze and didn't do anything. I can't believe I let that happen. And so people start to kind of reflect on like the things that they didn't have any control over. Like I would imagine your lower brains were kind of going, here, I'm going to help you here because this is, really intense stuff.
Yeah.
And, and then when you're reflecting back, you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that. But in reality, it was doing it to kind of, to protect you, to keep you going. Because you had to keep going. Like your brain's going, I got a job to do. I got to keep going. I got to find a way to get through it. But then, like you said, I've heard you say it a couple of times, it catches up later,
Yes.
like it takes, you don't necessarily notice it right away. And that get kind of concerning. Like you don't recognize, like your brain does something to kind of get you to not pay attention to the signals, to the red flares that are shooting up saying, hey, you need to talk about it. You need to deal with it. You need to do something about it, because there are forces at play that say, no, you can't do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I was good at keeping it down and not thinking about it for a long time. I'm sure there was areas of my life, if I, had a camera and could look, video footage of and look back and find things in my life after getting off out of EMS that, were PTSD symptoms that, I had trouble sleeping and things like that. But to me, I was just like, hey, I'm working hard. I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Right. But it wasn't until like I owned a fitness gym. I went to college after, and then I owned a fitness training facility. And I was one day just sitting there, I was talking to my coach and we were just talking about the day. And next thing I know, I just felt this weird, like, boom. I felt like this weird thing in my chest.
Yeah.
And like a drop. And all of a sudden, like my heart rate just like spiked. Like it just went through the roof. And like my coach was like, Seth, you look pale. Like, what's going on? I'm like, I have no idea. And I was like, I think I'm dying. And so I was like, call 911. So she called 911 and the ambulance came and picked me up and took me to the hospital. And I mean, my wife came and my in-laws came. Like they thought like, man, what's going on? Seth's leaving us. And and they did a whole workup, spent a whole night there. And when I woke and got released the next day, and they said, we don't know what happened. It must have been some heart, like maybe a heart arrhythmia that happened out of the blue. We're not sure. And so I thought I had some heart thing going on. And so it was a couple days later, something similar happened again. And I'm like, man, this is weird. I can't believe I got some heart issue. And I spent a couple months like dealing with thinking like I was having like a heart issue. And it was happening frequently. Mm-hmm. And then one time I was driving home after a baseball game, went to a baseball game with my family, and I'm driving home and it happens again. And like, it was pretty intense. And I thought something else has to be going on. So I just typed into YouTube. I don't remember what I typed into YouTube. And a video came up with someone talking about their panic attack symptoms. And I was like, I told my wife, I said, I think I'm having a panic. I think this is a panic attack. I think this is not related.
That's better. Okay. Yeah. So you were talking, hey, we go with the flow, we adapt and overcome. So you were talking about, I think you were on your second panic attack while you're driving, and you're like, okay, something's not right. This isn't a heart issue, which I think commonly happens where people start having, because the body reflects our mental health, right? Because the stress is taken out on our body. So many times people go to the doctor and they do all the physical workups and find nothing. And then we're like, okay, we don't know what's going on, but the stress response is the same for our mental wellness as it is for our physical wellness. It operates the same. So
Yeah.
They're easily affected the same way.
It is. And so I had no idea. And then when I started to figure out, like, this is panic attacks, this is PTSD, this is, related to my past, there were a couple thoughts. Is one, like, I thought about all the times that, like, when I was on the ambulance, I would take people to the hospital that were having panic attacks. And I was thinking, like, come on,
Right.
like, let's get it together. Like we would took people quite regularly, to the hospital, or we take them, to a mental health hospital from a hospital. We'd just be transporting them, things like that. And not that I didn't have empathy, I just didn't understand at that time,
Right.
and I was like, thinking, here I was thinking, hey, I'm seeing all this stuff and I'm okay, not knowing that was gonna, one day down the road,
I've got plans for you.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And so that was a thought. But also another thought I had was like, okay, like if this is not going to be my identity. I told my therapist right away, like, okay, this is not my identity. If PTSD is what I have, if panic and anxiety and these things that I'm battling right now, like, I'm going to battle them. And I'm going to work on them just like I would if I had a heart issue or I had something. It was very important to me right away to try to make sure that it wasn't who I was. It was something I was dealing with. It was something I was battling, and I had heard so many times people say, like, I live with PTSD, and I'm not saying anything negative against people who have those feelings or those thoughts about what they're going through. It's just me personally. I was like, I can't put myself in as that's who I am, because I know that's not who I have been.
Right.
So that allowed me personally to find the motivation and the drive to, like, seek out, like, how do I work through this? Meditation, EMDR, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'm wondering if just kind of the nature of the culture, like the very same culture that probably makes it hard for you guys to seek out help, is also the culture that would make you very dedicated or motivated to get through it. Like it's almost kind of like, it's like a slippery slope. Like the culture of kind of like, we're trained to face the most dangerous situations, the most challenging, stressful situations, is good in a sense that it gives you that warrior mentality of, I'm going to tackle this and get through it. But at the same breath, it is also the same culture that says, don't do that, because if you do that, then you're really not being a warrior, and you're really not doing that. So it's like a kind of a slippery slope there. Would you say?
Absolutely, it is. And that it is so hard for us in the EMS and first responder, in many professions, right? To I'm going to say admit, I want maybe to come to the acceptance that, we're humans and we respond to things just as other humans do. We have these defense mechanisms that we put up and help us, cope with what we're facing. But we have to be able to come to a place where we have accept, and we do that with having conversations about it, with talking about what we've been through, or that it's okay to not be okay, and it's okay to seek help and to talk to people about it, and to make that normal, and to make that if something's affecting you and you go talk to somebody, that it doesn't mean that you're bad at what you do, that you can't handle the next call, right? That you can't deal with it, because, like, in our really, not just in the EMS, like, kind of profession, but really in the United States, I would say, maybe other cultures are better at this, but than we are, but we don't learn how to deal with trauma just as a whole. We don't learn how to talk about it, right? We don't learn how to hear it, to make space for other people to, say, because we feel like, hey, we have to fix it. Like, I heard a great quote the other day, or someone say on another podcast, that said, I don't know how to turn on the lights, but I'm willing to sit with you in the dark. like, and that was like, that was so impactful when I heard that. But
Being with,
like, we don't, right. We don't know how to do that. And so since I don't see any of my peers
doing
or
it.
even any of my family talking about their trauma or their hurt or their sadness, then I think I'm alone in it. And why would I share it? Because I don't hear anyone else sharing theirs. So it
Definitely
must
don't want to
just
be the
be a
first
me,
one, right? You don't want
right?
to.
It must just be a me thing,
Yeah.
right? And other countries and other languages have words that have deep meanings, where when they're said, other people know that they can kind of have that almost lived experience with you of like, this is, you're going through this, where I don't really feel like in our language we have like those kind of words. We just have trauma, tragedy,
Yeah.
heartbreak. Like, like people
Well,
don't want to say I'm heartbroken. Like they want to say, but they have those other words and they can deal with that stuff.
well, and I think ultimately, and unfortunately, because we have a medical model, everything's about disorders and diseases, and so
Mm,
the
mm,
language that people use in the mental health field is you have a disorder, you have a
yes.
depression disorder, an anxiety disorder, even post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah.
It's a disorder that you got traumatized, like,
Yes.
and
Yes.
so
So true. Yeah.
certainly everybody is going to want to avoid that. Like, I don't want to admit that I have that. I was listening to, there's a I forgot the name of it, on Apple TV Plus or whatever, the Prince Harry, and they did like a 6 episode special on mental health and everything like that. And
Mm,
he referred to the term injury. And I
mm,
really love
mhm.
that, because I think that's what it is. Like,
Yep.
you're getting injured by these events and experiences, and injuries. We can go through a rehabilitation just like you would kind of a physical injury. And I almost,
Yeah.
and tell me what your thoughts about this, but like, I wonder if what's going through your mind is that, like, when I have like a physical injury, like I hurt my knee on a call or something like that, no one really questions necessarily all. That's not the first thing you go to question that they would ever be able to come back from it. I
Hmm.
bet you that people's minds go to, if I have a mental health injury like trauma, people wonder, are you going to be able to come back from that? And
Yeah.
so I don't want to admit that, because then I'm worried that my boss, my peers might think I'm not able to cut the mustard, like be able to keep up, be able to kind of handle, are you going to be there for me when I need you the most, and those types of things.
Yeah.
Are those some of the things that go through people's heads when they're trying to deal with that stuff? And is there any other kind of worries and fears that happen that kind of prevent you from trying to get help or trying to deal with it in a healthy way?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when your only strategy, when you're not really taught, like in EMS, you're not taught. They're doing a better job of it now than they were when
Yeah.
I was in it. There's still a long way to go.
Right.
But it, there's such a stigma around it. And when your only strategy is avoidance and you don't know any other strategies, and you're not even really open to hearing any other strategies, because you're
Mhm.
like, one of my favorite quotes from Joseph Campbell is
Yeah.
the cave you fear to enter holds the treasures you seek. And I feel like I should have it tattooed on my body. Like I like that, like my
Can you
therapist
repeat
says,
that one
like,
again? Can you repeat that
yeah,
one again?
yeah, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasures you seek.
Ah,
Um, and I've talked to my therapist about it. And I always joke with her that it's a good thing and it's a challenging thing, because I force myself into caves. I don't know why. Like that's just something I've always just like felt like I do, is like I go, okay, it's going to be really scary, but there's going to be something positive that comes out of
yeah,
it. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to check out this trauma thing. I'm going to see what's
yeah,
going on in my mind, even though it's going to be scary and it's going to hurt a little. But, but when I was in the EMS and doing it, I held back because I don't want to enter that cave. Like once you
yeah.
enter that cave, you're like, what's going to happen? Am I going to,
How
I'm up
bad is it going to
for,
get?
yeah, I got to get back to work tomorrow. Like I got to sign in. I got to
Time for
save
this.
lives, like
Mhm.
so I don't want to go down that cave, and I don't want anyone else to even know I'm thinking about going down that cave. I don't want my boss to know, like you said. And we can't, since we don't talk about it just in general, you know, um, from an early age, from childhood, we don't talk about it. And most people don't talk about it.
Right.
It's the thing is, like, we don't know how to relate to it. I had a friend of mine who I talked to recently, and he admitted, he goes, I'm 32 and I can look back. I had a great childhood. My parents were awesome. And I don't really feel like I have ever really had anything traumatic go on in my life. He goes, so it's hard for me to, like, really even understand or relate at all when you say that you have PTSD. And I said, that's okay. I said, but I said, have you ever broken a bone? He's never broken a bone. I said, but if I, like, shattered my leg, and I said, hey dude, I shattered my leg, what would you think? He's like, oh my God, I would feel for you so bad. Like, even though he's never shattered a bone, he could relate to all the challenges that I would have in my life if my whole lower leg was in a cast. Like, he's like, oh, that would be hard on your work. Maybe you should take time off. Like, he could feel the pain, even though he's never felt it. He could be like, that would be so painful to shatter your leg. But if I say I've got all this other stuff going on, these mental injuries, he just couldn't understand it. I mean, he had no, and it's not that there was no trauma, no deaths in his family, probably, but and I don't know, but we shelter so much. So many people are sheltered from traumas, from things like that it's hard to understand. Like, I tell my wife, like, we were living in Vegas, Henderson, for a while, right next to Vegas. And we were walking down the street at the Strip, and there's a lot of, people there on the Strip that, live there on the sidewalks, and they're in so much pain and hurt and tragedy in their life. And I told my wife, I said, my daughters are 9 and 12. I said, I don't want to hide this from them, because, like, I'd be hiding a whole part of life existence that they would never know was there. Where in other countries, kids are growing up in situations where the whole town, the whole city's like that, the whole town's like that, right? So we avoid, we don't want to get into it. And then afterwards, there's a lot of people I know, it's like, hey, they don't want to, like, I don't have PTSD. I don't have any issues from my time in the service. And then they're drinking every single day, or they've got some sort of vice, some sort of addiction that they've got. And it's like, I think there is, and a lot of people, someone told me once, I was talking to a buddy, he's still in the fire department. And he opened up and shared a lot of things with me, and he's in a position where he doesn't want to say anything. He doesn't feel like he can say anything. But something he said, he's like, yeah, he's like, I don't know. You think about all the World War II vets and all the World War I vets and all them, and the Vietnam vets and all that they saw. And they came home and they handled their job and they raised their families and they worked. And I said, yes. And when I walk into the mental health clinic at the Veterans Affairs office, and I'm sitting around with a bunch of gentlemen, men and women, who are wearing hats that say World War II, Vietnam, and they're waiting for their appointments to go in to speak with their therapist. So I said, we don't see that. So
well, we probably create this world in our head to kind of support the idea that I don't need to get help. Like, if my brain is so focused on trying to protect myself from, I'm afraid that if I address this, it's going to get too bad, then everything I see gets filtered through that lens. So there's nobody out there that is doing it. Everybody's handling their business. People, real firemen, suck it up. They put their uniform back on and they get right back out of there, and they just don't let it get to them. And that is them trying to kind of navigate this world and deal with the fear and, the struggle with what's going to happen if I actually have to deal with that. Will my world fall apart if I address it, and as long as, and I think that's, I guess, it kind of got to the point where it got really bad, where you were having multiple panic attacks before you made your first step, right? Your first real step to get help. Like, what is your like, what was that first step experience like? Because I almost think like, I think of, I guess the example I wanted to give is we would start services in the school, mental health services in the school. And so our therapist would go and try to get a kid out of class, and they would be like, I don't want you to pull me out of class. Can you just have the office call me down and tell me that I have to come to the office for something, and then I'll see you? And that was the beginning, because it was so unfamiliar, like, and there was such a stigma. But then over time, and people started recognizing, oh, this is part of what we do, and it became more normalized. And then no one cared about that. Hey, you went with, so and so to their office and talked about stuff like that. That's kind of like, I would imagine that first step, like once you kind of have to cross that threshold, is the hardest thing. And then once you get it going, you're able to kind of get some familiarity with that process.
Yeah. I knew that this is not this wasn't where I wanted to be in my life. I did not want to live my life, locked inside both my own mind and locked inside my house. Like, I didn't want to. I owned a gym at the time, and I didn't talk about it. I mean, I would literally be waking up and going and teaching classes and having 15 people in there working out, and me have a massive panic attack, and no one knew. And I also I read up on agoraphobia, whereas, it was like, where it can eventually, people don't want to leave their house. And my heart goes out to those people that are suffering from that. And I knew, like, I could sense myself, like, wanting to be like, oh man, I don't even want to go to work. But then I would push myself and be like, no, this is not my identity. I'm just going to go. I flew on planes. I flew to Scandinavia feeling like having panic attacks on the plane, but I was like, I'm not going to stop living. I'm just going to keep going. But I still kept it inside. I still didn't talk about it. And, the therapy that I was doing was helpful. I found the right therapist recently, last year, through the VA, she's absolutely amazing and trauma trained. And so, like, working with her has been unreal in my recovery. But it was a lot of me having to mentally take those next steps of, like, I'm going to work through this. I'm going to get better. And I don't have panic attacks now. I don't have, I still have PTSD symptoms in many ways, but I don't have panic attacks. I don't have anxiety attacks. They could happen any moment, but they're not happening every day. They're not happening really ever right now, because I've gone through, I've done treatment, I've done EMDR, I've done all those things. And now I'm at a point where I want to talk about it because, I felt like sharing my story because, so many people, we feel like, again, we need to live this secret life. And knowing that, like, I saw other people, like, I heard, like, Tony Robbins talk about him having a therapist one time. I'm like, wow, he's like a therapist to many people. So if he is a therapist, maybe, maybe this is something I need to do, and know that, like, it's possible to also be successful, like, actualize your goals in life and move forward. And that therapy can help if you trust the person that is guiding you, or you go in and you do the work, and, it doesn't have to be exhausting. It can be, hey, I'm going to go lay in a float tank and I'm going to do some breath work while I'm doing it. I'm going to just lie at home and do some meditation. I'm going to do some journaling. And, where my profession is right now, I work with professional athletes. I'm on tour full time. I travel all over the country. And, most people think somebody with PTSD that has a lot of trauma, that's gone through depression and all that I should be in my room with a blanket over my head and, and not leaving my house. And I totally understand that there's people that are going through that right now. And I, like I said, nothing but love for all of them, and healing, thoughts of healing. But you can move forward with it. I think that's a thing in EMS, is people are like, once you go into that cave, like, you're never going to be successful in life. Like, like, you're just going down. It's like, no, I've got my degree and I've got this and that, and I work in professional athletics and I travel and I do all kinds of stuff, and I've gone through all this stuff. And so you can move through it in a successful way. It doesn't mean you're damaged. It doesn't mean you're broken.
No.
And you can still do your job and you can still be successful. I still have responded on things. One of my biggest traumas in my life, in 2020, well into my PTSD, I was doing very, very well. I relapsed afterwards in some ways that I've worked through. But in 2020, Mother's Day, I woke up, we were at my in-laws' house, and my father-in-law came down and yelled for me and said, something wrong with my mother-in-law. And I went up there, and 56 years old. She was, passed away in the middle of the night from a blood clot that she had no idea she had. It was, deep vein thrombosis, became a pulmonary embolism. And I jumped right in and I did CPR. I tried to resuscitate her. I did everything I could until the ambulance got there. I didn't, because I had PTSD, because I had been going through all this stuff, I didn't run away from it. I still did my job. And that's one, I think some people deep down, they're like, if I go down those holes, like, would I be able to handle situations?
Would I be able to still be effective in my job? Yeah.
I did everything I could to be there for her in her time of greatest need. Right. And now that's spurred other symptoms after that I've been processing through with my therapist. But I'm still here and I'm still doing it.
Well, and statistically, and we've done research because we're working on some stuff for first responders, that you're more likely to die from a self-inflicted injury than you are on duty in your job. And so if you self-inflict and take your life, you're no longer available to do your job. And so, there's that opportunity to, if I work on myself, just like, I would assume in many of the different first responder professions, you have to keep up a certain level of physical health. Like you still have to stay in shape to some degree and be able to respond and do the things that are required for your job. I think that should be the same requirement for a mental health in many different professions. You should have to kind of still keep your mental health going so that you do stay fit and you aren't going to make mistakes because you're decompensating, breaking down mentally because of it. And I think that becomes a huge issue.
And they prepare you for your job. I mean, they prepare you really well for your job to show up and to help people in their time of greatest need. But they do, like I said, I think they're doing better now, in some ways, a little bit. But there's still a lot of people that just they're not receptive to it because it's not how, they came up through the ranks of EMS, where it's like, they don't talk at all about how you're going to the process or not process the things that you see to help you after and you kind of just think like, well, it's my job, and that's what I get paid for. And unfortunately, EMS is very, very underpaid. I was making minimum wage on the ambulance, doing,
that's crazy,
911 and all kinds of crazy stuff for minimum wage, at that time. And but you just say that it's just like this it's just like this saying, it's like, hey, it's my job, it's what I'm there to do.
So do you I just had a quick question about this do you think that the culture that the cultural activities that occur in first responder groups, police, fire, whatever, the things that we do, that there are some elements that almost perpetuate the maladaptive coping, or the things that make it hard to kind of do that? Like if I'm like, would it cause issues, like in terms of like there some of the ways that maybe people kind of naturally tried to cope with it became part of the culture, and then we're finding that part of that doesn't help out in every situation? Like it maybe helps out to a certain level, but there's a kind of like a set point that when you go beyond that set point, you got to do something else.
The culture is very much like, it's not said, it's not written down, but it's just shut up and do your work, show up, do your work. I'm going to gender this phrase because this is what they would say is, the man up culture, and so it's like, you just got to be quiet and you just look around and see what others do with their no training, for the most part, for a long time, of like how to handle things. it's just, you look around and what's everyone else doing? Everyone else gets done with the call that's been here longer than I am, and they just go back and make a sandwich, or like go get back to work and get back to doing whatever they had to do before, and totally ignoring the fact that they just ran on a very intense traffic accident with death involved, and now they just do the thing, and you just pile it away. And to like you said earlier, like where you said, self-inflicted wounds, more people in the first responder community are more likely to die from self-inflicted wounds, and that's so true. And I was talking to a friend recently who he has had, 3 captains end their life,
Yep.
And knows others that have ended their life. And I remember seeing years ago this firefighter from down where I was from, Orange County. He jumped off a bridge onto the freeway, and he had a family.
Yeah.
And people are like, "Oh, he was such a great guy, and he was so positive, and no one ever saw this coming." And and it's so tragic and so sad. It's like, I understand why we don't see it coming, because I mean, he probably felt like he couldn't share it with anyone, and he was stuck, and he had, and he loved what he did, I'm sure. And so to think that if he felt like he needed help, would have potentially jeopardized what he loved doing for a living.
The masks we wear.
Yeah, exactly. And another thing too is, and I've heard this multiple times, is like, he was out on injury. He had hurt himself. And so it was during that period that it really started to affect him. And I've talked to other people that are in EMS where they injure their back, or they injure their knee or something. They're out for a little while. And that's when things start to go wrong. That's when things start to go awry, because now they're not in their space, their safe space, which is the fire station or the ambulance or the, whatever, like they're the police car, right? They're not around those people who are all doing the same thing. They're at home with their families. They're alone in their thoughts. Their families go off to work. Their kids go off to school. They're sitting at home on the couch. Things start happening. Memories start coming up, right? Yep. And they don't feel like they have anywhere to turn. And now they're already out on injury. Now they're going to tell their boss, like, "Hey, I think I need a little more time because I need to see a therapist." Like, that's just not.
No, they're itching to get back. And I think, their identity, just especially with men, we tend to put a lot of our identity into our profession. So if we're not doing that, then who are we? Right. And so that also plays a role in that. I mean, that's very similar in the athletics world, the professional sports world, where people go on injury and they can't do the things that they were, bred to do. And that becomes an issue. I'm wondering, just kind of, there's a couple things that stood out to me, but I'm just thinking about, like, how would you want to see things for first responders in terms of how can we do the things that make us who we are? I mean, because I think that's a very prideful and great career and profession, and the things that those folks do, that you guys do, is just really so needed and impressive and wonderful. How do you bridge that gap? How do you bridge that gap between, well, if we really want to be successful in the long run, we got to make mental health or mental wellness a priority? How would you, like, what would be your recommendations for how we address this?
That's a great question. So like in the sport of disc golf, which I work in, when I started my company back in 2016 in disc golf, there was nobody in the sport of disc golf doing what I did. And in professional disc golf, they were just at a point where, like, nobody trained, nobody warmed up, nobody cooled down, nobody thought about recovery strategies, nothing. Right. And when I showed up saying, "Hey, I'm here, I'm a strength coach, like, let's do some warm-ups," like, the professional athletes were like, "I'm not doing that. Like, I'm looking around at the tournament and literally no one else is doing that. I'm not going to do that." Right. And so, it took time, but I had one athlete who was like, hey, I played sports in high school, and
We did it
warming
then.
up was something I did that was important. So let's do that. And they started warming up, and they just happened to be a very high level player. And then other people started seeing it and said, okay, now Seth's not over there like, just doing things by himself or just standing around waiting for people to come over. Like, he's just saying like, hey, let's just start with a warm up. Let's not get into a whole routine right now. Let's just start with a warm up. Like, let's just get your body moving a little bit before you throw a disc, right? And then it grew and it grew, and now we're at today where we're in a much different position. There's a lot of great therapies. There's a lot of great therapeutic tools and methods and that can help a lot of people. But people are not going to, in EMS, they're not going to start doing it until they see other people talking about it, right? And that's one of the things where I feel like I'm I don't know if I'm being led to do like it's like me personally myself, but I just feel like this desire to share because I see how much hurt. And it's not weird to say that, but when I say hurt, none of my friends in the EMS field would say that they're hurting.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But I'll say it, but they don't know it. And I didn't know it. And I'm not trying to put any labels on anybody, but I'm saying like, until they start realizing like, like my brother-in-law is he's a paramedic firefighter now. And then, and I've mentioned it to him and he's like, yeah. Like he's young, I'm like, hey, I was the same way. I could run and do anything at any time, I'm not a weak-minded person, neither are you, but starting to see other people talk about their lived experiences and they can see people that are successful that have gone through that say, hey, Seth has gone through that. He sees a therapist. He's living at like he's moderately successful in his life and what he's doing, like maybe that's something I should think about. And so it really takes that. I think that's going to be a big part is other voices that have gone through it saying, hey, I've done this and I've come out the other side.
Yeah.
It is something I think is going to be beneficial for others, for you to do. A friend of mine who called me, who's in the fire still, he, I love it. I'm not saying his name, obviously. I wrote a Facebook post and he reached out to me and he's like, hey, are you okay? And I was like, hey, yeah, it's Mental Health Awareness Month. I'm kind of sharing my story. I said, I love you, man. I'm so thankful that you reached out to me to see if I was okay. Yeah. And he's like, hey, I've done training, as a captain. And I've seen some of this stuff. I've been taught what to look for. He goes, and so I saw you saying things. I'm like, I'm so glad you reached out. That is amazing. That's what we need more of. Right. But just talking to this person, this friend of mine, like he was like, hey, they do therapy. They have like a phone call and they have the system where you can call. Because I called once and, and didn't really go forward with it. He goes, but hey, since you're talking about it, maybe I should look into it.
But I think there's a few things that I take from it, and it's really wonderful what you just said. The first thing, your example with the disc golf makes me think of course, you're talking about, okay, someone is the more people that start to step up and say, I'm working on my mental health and that's okay. I'm making sure that I'm, I get it started. But I also think almost like your disc golf example, like we need to warm up. We need to kind of like do things every time we're on shift, every daily, that we're doing things to kind of work on our resilience. Because I think that's also the big point. Like, for example, your friend who's never had traumas and never really has any mental health symptoms or issues or anything like that. We kind of describe it in terms of like what happened with COVID is you could have like typically organized and developed people that don't have lots of traumas and everything like that and handle life really well. But then all of a sudden you're just hit with all these adversities that start to kind of come into your life. You lose people you love, maybe you lose your job, or, you start having financial troubles. And then all of a sudden you're no longer typically organized. You're very vulnerable. And you start having problems. So even though, man, you're living the good life and everything's going, doesn't mean that the shift can't happen.
Absolutely.
if you're not doing something every day to take care of yourself. If you ignore those things, or if you just don't address it and don't see it as a priority in your life, things can happen in life that take your life in a different direction. And your, so I think both of those, like, number one, we need people to kind of step up and say, hey, no, this has to be part of our work, is to keep ourselves mentally strong too, and be able to have a way to deal with the stuff, because I'm a firm believer that it's also, they can train you as much as they want, but your brain isn't going to think of every possible thing that you're going to see and deal with. And so you can't possibly prepare for all the tragedies in the world. And you never know which one's going to hit you differently than the other. You might been like, okay, this is fine. I can deal with it. Boom, this one hits you. And you're like, something about that event, and you've gone down a different road.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, the warm-up idea, like when I started working with like a company, a disc golf company reached out to me early on, was like, hey, we'd love to have you do a video series for that we can put out on our social media channels of like, strength training for disc golf. And I sent them some videos. It was all body weight stuff. And they were like, oh, do you not like lift weight? Like, do you not believe in bands and this? And I said, I do. I said, but right now where we're at in the sport, I want anybody who watches this video to push their chair away from the desk and be able to get down and feel like they can be successful and do it right now, and not feel like I need to do this and I need to do all these different things. When I started with the warm-ups, it was very simple. It was like, hey, let's not think about all this stuff. Let's just put this into use. Maybe if you don't feel like you need a warm up right now, let's make it so simple and accessible that it's almost like, why not? And then people start doing more. I didn't just, even though I started therapy, like I didn't jump into EMDR and this and all that right away. It was like, let's just start with some breath work. Let's just start with doing some box breathing, and let's just work on, a little bit of journaling. And it was very simple stuff.
Well, and I think that, and the other thing that you're mentioning is that all mental health work is not talking. Like,
yes,
it's taking care of your body in a different way. Like we talk about like our resilience tenets being breathe, laugh, move. So, controlling our breath and using our breath to help us, laughing a lot more, and then moving and movement. And you're original strength coach, and so am I. And just being able to kind of move your body so that your body, the better your body moves, I think the more mentally agile you will be. And the more, I think I see it every day at my job where, mental health, we denigrate, like physically, we stop moving, we stop taking care of our body, we become physically unhealthy. And so there's such a direct link between the two that it only makes sense that when you take care of your body physically, you're going to have a benefit on your mental health. And
absolutely.
And so there's a lot of things that actually we encourage, especially on our platform, that has nothing to do with talking about your traumas. I mean, I do think that you have to revisit your traumas in some way to fully heal and take care of it. But there are a lot of non-talking things that you can do working with your body that's going to help you be resilient and mentally healthy.
Absolutely. Yeah. Physical movement, is so important in that recovery process. Just in general overall health, physical health, mental health, like you're saying. And, and just to kind of speak briefly to original strength, like that, like when I was going through like my biggest PTSD, like symptoms, like I was working with original strength, and that's all I could do. For a lot of it, I could get on the ground. I could do some rolling and some head nods and some, some rocking and breathing and crawling and stuff, because part of my PTSD was, one of my biggest symptoms was like my heart rate. My heart rate started to elevate. I mean, boom, like I would go right into a panic attack. And I told a young guy, he was in his early 30s on an ambulance one time. He's playing pickup basketball, and I said, he's out of breath, and I said, hey, you're okay. You were just playing pickup basketball. You're young, you're healthy, and just trying to encourage him, just to try to get him to calm down. And he's like, I think I'm going to die. I think I'm going to die. My heart, I think I'm going to die. And I was like, we were like, okay, just take some breaths, calm down, calm down. And about, 2 minutes before we got to the hospital, we were doing CPR on him and he passed on us, and so like that, like through my therapy, I found like that was something like I couldn't work out, and I'm here, I'm a strength coach, but
Yeah.
anything that elevated my heart rate, my amygdala was like, oh, remember that guy that said that
It's an
he told him he was
evocative
gonna be
cue.
fine.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, get down on the ground, let's do some rocking, let's do something, let's do some breath work, let's do some head nods, let's do some rolling patterns, like, and I've been with Original Strength from the very beginning. I was there for the very first session that they did back in the day, and yeah, any type of movement, whether it's something like OS or any going for a walk, a walk with friends is also
Right.
good. But there's so much you can do, right?
Absolutely. Well, Seth, I was really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah,
I'm really
same.
happy that I got to have you on and talk about this important topic. I think you're doing great stuff, and I applaud your dedication to mental health and mental wellness and people needing to take care of ourselves, and your willingness to share your journey with everyone. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Doug.
Wish you all the luck. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been such a pleasure to be here, sharing my story with you and our conversation, and to all you to everyone that's going to listen to this, know that it doesn't have to be your identity. It shouldn't be your identity, and you can continue to move forward. And whether you talk to anybody, a journal, talk to somebody, talk to a friend, talk to a professional. There are ways to move forward.
Absolutely. We always say in trauma work that trauma is only one part of who you are, is not all of
Yep.
who you are. And so you're speaking to that. So
Yep.
thank you, and take care, everybody.